Dad pushed his plate away and didn't even look up. "Sometimes, Margaret, I wish you were never born," he said. The room froze. The roast steamed like a quiet insult. My hands still smelled like disinfectant from a 12-hour shift. I stood, chair scraping wood, pulse hammering behind my ribs. "Perfect," I said. "Then you won't need me when you're old." Silence burst like glass. Bruce stared. My mother finally blinked. That was the last family dinner I ever attended. My name is Margaret, 28, an ER nurse in Ohio. After 12-hour shifts, I still drove to Tuesday dinners. I brought flowers, dessert, and hope I couldn't quite kill. Maybe this week they'd see me, not Bruce's brighter outline. Dad is Frank, 62. Mom is Patricia, 59. Bruce is 31, an engineer, married to Sandra, glowing. He is the headline. I'm a footnote they skim past. My promotions become nice. His meetings become family-breaking news. I swap shifts, fix their phones, explain meds and insurance. At work, I run codes. At home, I'm just a nurse. I kept showing up because love makes patient bargains. Tonight began the same, until one sentence ended that ritual. Before I tell you what I did next, if this feels familiar, tell me where you're watching from. And please like and subscribe so more stories find you, because what followed made even Bruce go silent and pale. And it started with me deciding I was done apologizing. I was born into a tidy, middle-class Ohio postcard. Dad worked the line at the auto plant for decades. Mom typed letters at a downtown law firm, punctual, precise. On paper, we looked solid. In practice, we tilted. Bruce shone early. I learned to dim without instructions. When Bruce brought home A's, they phoned relatives between desserts. When I brought home A's, they asked about other areas. "Why can't you be more like Bruce?" Mom wondered. I kept studying anyway, hoping effort might translate to love. At 16, my birthday vanished under a scholarship interview. I waited upstairs with a store-bought candle and silence. Downstairs, they ironed Bruce's shirt and rehearsed answers. The cake melted into its plastic clamshell by midnight. 2 weeks later, his touchdown got a surprise party. High school graduation collided with Bruce's away game, 3 hours. They chose bleachers over my name called in Echoing Jim. I scanned for them, found 2 empty chairs pretending. Later, Dad explained it might open professional opportunities. Apparently, my diploma opened only a polite yawn. Nursing school with honors finally pulled them into seats. But even then, Bruce called with promotion news mid-dinner. Speakerphone swallowed 45 minutes while my diploma cooled. "Isn't he remarkable?" Mom asked, patting Bruce's absence gently. I folded my napkin and memorized the pattern of neglect. Still, I kept the rituals that make families possible. Sunday calls, holiday gifts, careful calendars to fit shifts. I swapped nights, arrived with flowers, and carried dessert. I taught Mom her smartphone, organized Dad's pillbox, color-coded. After his mild heart scare, I drew a blood pressure chart. The ER taught me a different math for worth. I held hands through thunderclaps of fear and grief. I read monitors like languages and caught small changes. I helped pull a man back from 4 silent minutes. My supervisor nominated me for the leadership cohort proudly. Colleagues trusted me with the worst 5 minutes nightly. Families thanked me with cards that smelled like kitchen drawers. I slept hard and woke ready to try again. In those rooms, I was seen without negotiation. At my parents' table, I was just a nurse. The comparison never retired. It took new disguises daily. Bruce planned strategically. I supposedly drifted without horizon. He bought a house. I rented near the hospital. He mapped a decade. I mapped vital signs hourly. He networked. I charted. Both took skill. Only one counted. "Think bigger," Dad said, meaning think Bruce, think ladder. Advanced degree, management, something that leads whole teams. I loved bedside nursing, the pulse of direct presence. Not everyone needs authority to deliver meaningful change. But my answer translated as proof I lacked ambition. I remember teaching Mom to share a photo. Her brow furrowed. My hands guided hers patiently. "Thank you," she said, already glancing at Bruce's text. He'd sent backsplash samples for a kitchen remodel. My help was useful. His choices were legendary. I remember Dad asking about chest tightness at midnight. I drove over, assessed, and convinced him to go. EKG, labs, reassurance, a stern talk about stress. He shook my hand like I was a stranger. "Don't tell your mother I panicked," he whispered sheepishly. I kept a ledger of unasked, ordinary, necessary love. Prescriptions refilled, passwords recovered, gutters scheduled before storms. Meanwhile, the highlight reel played Bruce, promotion, timeline, Riverside Estates. Even their compliments wore footnotes that downgraded mine. "Nice, dear," Mom said, saving bravos for someone else. When I tried to share, the room lost reception. I mentioned electrical burns from vehicle battery accidents recently. No one asked a question. The topic swerved immediately. I offered prenatal resources from our ER education series. "Her doctor will handle that," Mom said, smiling past me. I learned to lengthen my breath between dismissals patiently. I learned to put respect where it earned daylight. I learned to stop auditioning for parts already cast. But habits of hope die slowly, even in veterans. So I kept arriving with wine, flowers, cake, patience. Tuesday dinners became a treadmill I refused to unplug. Maybe this week, I thought, the orbit might shift. Maybe someone would remember the saved lives, not linens. Maybe someone would ask about the man who survived. Maybe Mom would hold my story without checking Bruce. Instead, the chorus repeated itself with polished choreography. Successful couples, strategic choices, the proper order, Riverside Estates, ambition measured in square footage and team headcounts. My metrics were quieter, survival rates, trust earned, steadiness. Apparently, quiet doesn't trend at my family's table. The night everything snapped looked ordinary from outside. Pot roast steamed, green beans crisped under onion crusts. Mom's roses leaned toward the window like eavesdroppers. My scrub still smelled like disinfectant and adrenaline ghosts. I set the cake down and smoothed the ribbon. Dad took the wine without meeting my eyes twice. "Tell us the California program," Mom said to Bruce. I took my old armchair just outside the circle. The house settled. The script flipped to familiar pages. I steadied my breath and counted to 12 slowly. By then, I knew patterns, knew where silence landed. I knew which jokes would follow which compliments predictably. I knew the exact place my name would vanish. I also knew the line I would not cross, and I felt it under my ribs that evening. I didn't come to start a war or plead. I came to test a boundary I had rehearsed. If love requires erasing myself, I would decline. If respect requires Bruce's costume, I would refuse. If honesty cost me dinner, I would pay. The fork in the road arrived as a single sentence. Dad's words detonated precisely where my patience ended. Everything I believed about family met its audit. And the ledger, finally, balanced in my favor. I stood up and the room learned my margins. I arrived with wine, flowers, and the stubborn hope that maybe tonight the orbit would shift a degree. Dad opened the door, smiled at the bottle, not me. "Bruce was just telling us about his promotion," he said. Inside, Mom hovered over appetizers. Bruce and Sandra gleamed. I set the cake down, smoothed the ribbon, out of habit. "Hi, everyone," I tried. Mom didn't look up. "You're late." The clock said 3 minutes past. Bruce was early. I was wrong. I apologized anyway, muscle memory from a childhood of apologizing. Then the living room clicked into its familiar choreography. Bruce described battery software and junior engineers he would lead. Mom's questions sparkled. Dad's praise landed like confetti. I offered a thread about electrical burn injuries from EV accidents, a bridge between our worlds. It fell straight through the floor. When Sandra mentioned trying for a second baby, I offered prenatal resources we share from the ER. "Her doctor will handle that," Mom said, smile fixed elsewhere. I took my place in the armchair just outside the circle. Dinner was Bruce's favorites: pot roast, extra butter mash, green bean casserole with the crispy onions, warm rolls. Brussels sprouts cooled on my plate, a ritual I didn't choose. "Riverside Estates has such beautiful homes," Mom beamed. "Successful people live there." Dad nodded like a metronome. "You've really made something of yourself, son." I tried again, something real from my week. We ran a code on a 55-year-old in triage. He arrested in front of us, 40 minutes. He survived. He sent a card. He mentioned me by name. "That must have been terrifying for his family," Sandra said politely. "That's nice, dear," Mom added, already turning back to Bruce. The word nice landed like a paper napkin on wet granite. I breathed, counted 12, and pressed forward once more. "I love my job," I said, "even the hard days." When you literally save someone's life, it steadies you. Mom's smile tilted. "Bruce, tell us about the California training." Just like that, my story blinked out of the room. I tried a different door. Our charge nurse recommended me for leadership. It means I'd lead an ER shift. Dad carved pot roast, didn't look up. "That's nice. But there isn't much upward mobility, is there? You'll still be just a nurse." The phrase stung clean. Years of restraint cracked around its simple disrespect. I set my fork down. Nursing isn't a consolation prize. I manage ventilators, titrate meds with narrow therapeutic windows, read rhythms, spot subtle trends before monitors catch them. I make split-second calls that keep hearts beating. Okay, let's not get emotional, Dad said, palms up. We're simply saying you could aim higher, like Bruce. Advanced degree, Mom added, management leading whole teams. You're smart enough to be a nurse practitioner or doctor. Sandra tried to soften it. It's a compliment, Margaret. You could be more. It was meant to help. It still shrank the life I chose to the size of a stepping stone. I like bedside, I said. Direct care is my why. Dad buttered his roll like we were discussing weather. Bruce has always thought strategically, he said, warming. Chose engineering for stability, picked a growth company, married someone from a good family who shares his values. Sandra blushed, pleased at being part of the plan. I watched the word strategic do all the lifting. Some people, Mom said, aiming between bites, lack that foresight. They drift. No savings, no partner, no long-term plan. I felt the sentence glance off me and still bruise. I have savings, I said. A budget, a plan. I rent near the hospital by design. I'm not drifting. Dad chuckled without humor. Not like Riverside Estates. The conversation turned to renovations, timelines, nursery colors. I counted the ways I had been useful this year. Taught Mom screenshots, reset the router, labeled the pill box, charted Dad's blood pressure after his scare, drove at midnight, translated deductibles into words that didn't frighten them. Apparently, usefulness is invisible when it isn't photogenic. Successful couples plan, Dad said, slicing success thinner. Right time, right order. Mom nodded. We're grateful. To have Bruce, someone dependable. The glance at me was surgical. I am dependable, I said, more to myself than to them. I've been considered for charge. My team relies on me. That's nice, Mom repeated, the napkin again on granite. I watched Bruce watch me, something almost human in his eyes. Don't you want more? He asked, genuinely curious. You're capable of more than bedpans and shots. The old caricature snapped something I'd kept taped together. That's not what I do, I said, voice sharpening. I assess, triage, run codes, keep people alive. Let's keep it civil, Dad said. We're trying to help. Sometimes people need to hear hard truths. These aren't truths, I said. They're preferences. Your preference for Bruce. Your version of ambition. Mom's mouth tightened. Always the victim, she said coolly. Always making it about you. I cataloged the hours I'd donated to this table. Switching shifts, showing up exhausted, bringing wine and flowers, remembering birthdays, anniversaries, cholesterol numbers, sodium limits. Small things, Dad said, waving a fork. We mean real responsibility, long-term planning, maturity. The word maturity arrived preloaded with judgment. I tasted metal and waited for the next shoe. It came wrapped in good intentions. Bruce leaned back. We should think long-term for you two as well, he said, gesturing at our parents. You're in your 60s now. At some point, you'll need help. Oh, Bruce, Mom said, soft and adoring. Always thinking ahead. Someone has to be responsible, Dad added, and looked at me. What do you mean by responsible? I asked, though I knew. Bruce has a stable career, a good marriage, savings, Mom said. If something happened, we could count on him. Whereas some people, Dad added, are almost 30, still unsettled. The word settled sat beside Brussels sprouts I wouldn't eat. I'm a registered nurse, I said evenly. This is my field. If anyone is logical for medical coordination, it's me. But your hours are crazy, Sandra said. How would you have time? And you're not married, Mom added, clinical as a chart. You don't have the stability Bruce and Sandra have. Marriage isn't a competency, I said. Schedules can be arranged. Dad laughed, sharp. You can barely manage your own life. Tiny apartment, no real savings, no serious relationship, he said, as if reading from a prepared list titled Evidence. I felt each line land and refused to rearrange my face. My finances are fine, I said. My apartment is intentional. My relationships are not your metrics. Mom inhaled, gathered a stack of old exhibits. Remember the summer camp when Grandma was moving? She said. You chose camp over family. It was a healthcare program I paid for, I said. I offered to help before or after. You said that week or nothing. And Bruce's graduation party, Dad added. You worked instead. It was my first month. I couldn't switch. I tried. You see, Mom said, verdict delivered. Always yourself first. Bruce would have found a way to be there. The ledger on the table tilted, spilling years. I picked up what I could and arranged it in order. Do you realize you're talking about me like I'm not here? I asked, narrating my life to me as if for strangers. We're helping you understand why you need changes, Dad said, firm. Hard truths, he repeated, as if repetition made them true. These aren't hard truths, I said. They're the same script. Bruce as the hero, me as the cautionary tale. Mom's glance at Dad was quick, practiced, familiar. Maybe, Dad said slowly, he's given us more to be proud of. The room thinned around that sentence, like altitude sickness. I remembered my name announced at graduation, empty seats. I remembered a thank you card that smelled like kitchen drawers. I remembered Dad whispering, "Don't tell your mother I panicked." I remembered the word nice like a stamp on my forehead. I set my napkin down and let silence do its work. Dad mistook it as an opening and leaned in further. "We're tired of walking on eggshells around your feelings," he said. "Bruce doesn't need constant validation. He takes responsibility." Validation, as if asking to be seen were a moral failure. The house waited. The clock remembered to tick again. In the pause, I could hear my own pulse steady. "What exactly," I asked, "would make you proud of me?" The question surprised even me in the way it arrived. Dad blinked, then squared his shoulders, gathering a declarative answer. He opened his mouth, and I felt the floor tilt. The sentence he was about to speak would split the house. I braced for the impact I had spent years rehearsing. Dad glanced at Mom, then squared his shoulders, breathing once. "You ask what would make us proud, accomplish something meaningful. Stop feeling sorry for yourself. Take responsibility for your life. Bruce doesn't need validation. He delivers, then moves forward." The words landed like gravel scattered across a hardwood floor. I let the silence sit, heavy, instructive, undeniable. "I deliver too," I said. "Lives, stabilized, discharged, breathing. You just don't clap for that because it isn't photogenic." Dad leaned in, mistaking honesty for permission to go further. "We're tired of eggshells. You turn everything into a crisis. If you gave us more to be proud of, maybe then." His sentence trailed, hunting for a doorway it shouldn't find. "Say it," I said. "Finish the thought you're rehearsing." His jaw worked. The room shrank to the edge of the table. "You want hard truth?" he said, voice rising, eyes bright. "Sometimes I wish you were never born, Margaret." Air vanished. The chandelier hummed. Sandra's hand flew to Bruce. Mom gasped, then didn't contradict him. She stared at me. "Maybe that's harsh," she whispered. "But sometimes I wish things different." The clock remembered to tick. The roast went suddenly cold. I felt something hard and simple crystallize in my chest. Not shock, recognition. The mask finally said its own name. Years of small slights arranged themselves into a single ledger line, and the balance at last was not in their favor. Bruce rose halfway, then sat, words stuck behind his teeth. "Dad didn't mean," he began, but even he sounded unsure. I looked at my father and saw a stranger taking attendance. I looked at my mother and saw someone nodding to absence. I set my napkin down, centered it with my fingers. Every training drilled into me. Breathe, assess, act, communicate. My pulse slowed to a workable rhythm. My hands steadied. If they wanted hard truth, I was ready to supply it. I stood. The chair scraped. The house leaned in, listening. Across from me, the family I'd served like an unpaid shift. Inside me, the boundary I had built, tested, and named. I lifted my eyes and chose the clearest possible sentence. Silence cracked open and I stepped into the gap. "Perfect," I said. "Then you won't need me when you're old." Mom's eyes flooded. Bruce froze. Dad's fork hung midair. "You asked for hard truth. Let me return the favor. When you had chest pains at midnight, who came immediately? Who took your vitals, drove you for an EKG, stayed? Who translated the results so you could sleep without terror? I did. The daughter you just wished out of existence. When a kidney stone folded you in half, Mom, who drove? Who held your hand, advocated when they tried early discharge? Who counted your breaths, fetched water, and argued for imaging? I did. The unambitious, drifting, just-a-nurse disappointment daughter. Who organizes your meds, labels boxes, schedules follow-up appointments? Who explains deductibles, out-of-pocket, and prior authorization letters? Who answers at 2 a.m. when panic masquerades as pain? I did. And I did it without posting for applause. You call Bruce responsible because his milestones photograph better than mine. You call me immature because I don't live in Riverside. You confuse square footage with character and titles with usefulness. You confuse management with meaning and a ladder with purpose. You say you're tired of eggshells. I'm tired of glass. Glass. I've been walking on since you forgot my 16th. You measured me against his headline and named me Footnote. You liked me useful, quiet, and grateful for crumbs. So let me be useful one last time, crystal clear. When you need rides to appointments, call Bruce, not my phone. When you need forms explained, ask Sandra, not my patients. When fear wakes you at 2 a.m., I won't answer. When the internet breaks, the router blinks, or pills run out, you'll Google it, hire someone, or wait until morning calmly. You wanted a simpler life. Simplicity looks like learning independence. You wanted a life without me. Consider this your tutorial. Understand me, I am not punishing, I am protecting. I am protecting the part of me that keeps breathing, the part that saves strangers and goes home with dignity, the part that has begged enough for basic recognition. Mom, I said softly, you nodded when he said never. You nodded to a world in which I do not exist. Please hear yourself, hear who you became at that table. Then decide if that is someone you wish to remain. Dad, I said, you called me dramatic for telling the truth. You asked for responsibility and then erased the responsible daughter. You wanted pride. I brought you living people as receipts. If that isn't enough, nothing I do will be. I am done auditioning for a part you already cast others. I am done translating love into tasks you won't remember. I am done pretending disrespect is advice and control is care. I am done being smaller so he can look bigger. Here is my plan, since you love plans and timelines. Tomorrow I change my number and update my records. I won't attend dinners, holidays, or answer third-hand messages. Medical questions? Ask your providers. That's what they're for. If remorse ever comes, it must begin with the sentence, the exact sentence you threw at me like a plate. Say it was cruel, untrue, and wholly your responsibility. Then we can discuss boundaries, not a reset to fantasy. Bruce started to speak. I held up a flat palm. Not your line to deliver, not your apology to craft. He closed his mouth, eyes wet with something like recognition. Even he looked smaller inside the costume they stitched him. Mom whispered my name, a sound I hadn't heard right. It reached me late, like radio through a storm front. But I had finally tuned to a different frequency completely, the one where my worth is not up for debate. Dad's face drained. The performance ran out of electricity quietly. He reached for the familiar script and found it missing. He opened his mouth, but the house refused to prompt. Even the clock seemed unwilling to lend him seconds. I walked to the doorway and picked up my purse. The cake I brought sat untouched, ribbon still neatly arranged. I turned back once, because endings deserve clean, quoted lines. I choose peace, I said. You choose whatever comes next. The door opened on a night so ordinary it startled. The air outside was cold and shockingly kind to lungs. Bruce didn't follow. Sandra didn't speak. Mom braced on chair. Dad stared at his hands like they finally belonged to him. I drove home in a silence that didn't scrape anymore. The sky was ordinary, which felt like a blessing tonight. I put the untouched cake on my counter, untying the ribbon. I poured water, sat, and wrote a list like triage. Change number tomorrow. New email. Update records at work. Inform HR, bank, landlord. Unsubscribe from old group threads. No contact through colleagues. No calls forwarded. No back doors. Boundaries aren't anger. Boundaries are oxygen. Breathe, assess, act. The clerk asked if I wanted to keep my number. A completely new one, I said, and she nodded carefully. At home, I updated portals, passwords, emergency contacts, everything. If it costs me self-respect, the price is too high. By Friday, flowers arrived with Patricia on the card. I refused. A voicemail reached work. I told the desk, no family calls. My hands shook later. Grief is a body, not theory. I made tea, watched the steam thin, then went to work. Without the weekly drain, my presence sharpened at the bedside. I mentored 2 new nurses. I signed up for trainings. My supervisor penciled my name for charge rotation. Families asked for me by name during the worst minutes. 3 weeks later, Bruce waited by his SUV after my shift. They didn't mean it, he said. They meant it enough to say it, I answered, steady. He reached. I closed the door and chose my peace. Sunday mornings ached, a ritual suddenly gone from my hands. I brewed coffee and learned the taste of unassigned hours. I joined a book club and a hiking group by accident. I tried pottery and laughed at lopsided bowls. Work offered more light. Dr. James Murphy asked for coffee. We'd run a brutal code. He thanked me afterward. He spoke to me like a partner, not an assistant. He listened without fixing, admired without directing my path. Linda from cardiology and Sarah from hiking filled the table. Marcus from book club planned a monthly restaurant experiment. This chosen family noticed birthdays without being prompted. They texted before shifts and relief when I clocked out. Updates about my parents slipped through the hospital grapevine. Frank started therapy for anxiety and chest pains. Patricia asked acquaintances if they'd seen me, worried tone rehearsed. Bruce got the promotion. Sandra looked tired in a break room story. 6 weeks in, I saw my mother at the store. She looked thinner, older, a shadow with a list. I left my cart and walked out into honest air. Grief for the idea of a mother still counts. 4 months later, Sandra appeared at the ER front desk. "Your mom had a stroke," she said, hands knotted tight. "Not here, Valley General. Speech and left side movement impaired." Her ask was measured, one professional call to the attending. Ethics sat beside me and looked me in the eye. Not reconciliation, clinical decency. Translate, then step back. I called Dr. Rodriguez, got the summary, wrote the questions. Ischemic, moderate, rehab prospects, reasonable with time and work. I met Sandra for coffee and translated jargon into pathways. "Thank you," she said. "Will you go see her?" "No," I said. "I've done the part I can." 3 days later, a letter came in a shaky hand. "Thank you for helping when we didn't deserve it. I'm sorry, I love you." 8 words, a small bridge. I put it in a drawer, I didn't throw it away. Healing is compost, slow, quiet, and changing things underneath. I moved apartments, closer to downtown and kinder light. Adopted Oliver, who understood the discipline of naps. Hung a print that said, "You don't have to audition." Home became a room that didn't ask me to disappear. At work, the day came. Senior nurse, my supervisor smiled. "Charge rotation next quarter if you want it, Margaret." I wanted it. Wanting isn't arrogance. It's finally telling the truth. I presented at a regional conference. My slides didn't tremble. Family isn't only blood. It's who shows up consistently. Linda brought soup. Sarah drove at dawn for my move. Marcus texted jokes exactly when a shift needed one. James asked, "What did you learn?" Not, "Why not more?" News traveled. Dad's chest pains were anxiety, discharge after 2 days. I wished him ease and kept my distance. Both true. Compassion without access. Love without the obligation costume. Some lessons are surgical. They remove what infects you. 9 months later, the mirror felt kinder at last. Not because I was new, because I believed me. I didn't need their approval to locate my worth. I didn't need their love to be capable of love. One evening, balcony air, dishwater sky, city hum. A text from James, "Proud of you. Sleep if you can." I thought about conditional love and the math of dignity. Forgiveness can be spacious without forgetting the original wound. If they ever come, it will start with words. Not whether, not "you're too sensitive," the words. We were cruel. We were wrong. It won't happen again. Until then, my boundary stands where my breath stays steady. I will keep choosing rooms that don't need me smaller. I will keep building a life where I fit full size. Find people who celebrate you. Be that person for yourself. Tomorrow, I will go save strangers and come home saved too. If you've ever been the overlooked one at your own table, tell me how you drew your line and what changed after. Share where you're watching from. If Margaret's story resonated, please like, share, and subscribe to Revenge with Alisa, so more people find the courage to set healthy boundaries. Your comments guide new episodes and remind someone out there that their worth isn't up for debate. Remember, love without respect isn't love. Peace without truth is just silence.